Welcome to the Unlocking the Club podcast, where we host honest and direct conversations about journeys of access, personal truth, and reclaiming space. We share our truth so that you can find the key to own your truth, honor your journey, and reclaim your space. Grab your keys, your wallet, your phone, and invite your friends to meet you at the club. Here's your host, Angela Taylor.
Hey folks, hello again. I'm Angela Taylor, your host for Unlocking the Club. And today we have another great conversation with a special guest coming up. Before we get to that conversation, I want to share one of those inside stories of outside moments with you. Now, these are those experiences that we may have that we often keep to ourselves for a variety of reasons. Perhaps you just in that moment aren't quite sure what that moment was. Or maybe you're a little embarrassed about it or frustrated by it and just want to keep it to yourself. And these are also those experiences where you felt like an outsider, right? So those inside stories of our outside moments. And this was prompted actually by a recent conversation I had earlier this week with a client. We were having a group discussion and the client mentioned a probably everyday occurrence or a regular occurrence for many of us. Those moments where you may be in conversation with somebody in the workplace and you talk about a project or a task or some information that was shared, and you're sharing it with your colleagues, and then your colleagues question whether you have that information correct or not, right? They question your accuracy. They question whether you heard the conversation properly. And instead of listening to what you had to say, they go to somebody else to get validation. And oftentimes, particularly if you are in a marginalized identity, right, they may go to somebody in a dominant culture identity to get validation. And just simply by asking one question, they get the information they want, and that information is correct or it's true. Well, this happened for a client where they had shared some information that they were confident about. They'd heard it over and over. They'd taken some notes around, and they shared it with a colleague. And the colleague said that they were going to go to someone else to verify that information. And the client in the moment didn't really think twice about it, mentioned it, was a little bit perturbed by that interaction, but left it there. And we had a little bit of a conversation about the microaggressions that happen on a regular basis, particularly to those of us in marginalized identities or identities where you're historically excluded. And I know for myself as a Black woman, oftentimes you've been subjected to these microaggressions. And sometimes we simply ignore them or minimize them or normalize them to a certain extent. And thought it was really important for us to share some of those moments because right, they can be tiny little paper cuts, right? But we also experience those death by 1,000 paper cuts over time when these subtle little things that somebody else may put off as trivial or insignificant may happen to you over and over and over again. And when I was having this conversation, I was brought back to something that happened nearly 20 years ago that still to this day, I can't quite reconcile it in my mind. But it certainly impacted me, and I've learned from it. I think I would react differently today than I did back then. But I also recognize that that was an important reminder that I had, that regardless of where I thought I was, how successful I thought I was, is that in a moment in time, someone can minimize who you are and what you've accomplished. So this story was actually in the spring of 2002. And in the week leading up to my graduation from New York University's Stern School of Business, which honestly was a really proud moment for me because I was able to accomplish that task. I always wanted to get an MBA. It was really important to me. It was important to my family for various reasons. As for many of us that are experiencing it, right, education is the gatekeeper, right, to success and a lot of the opportunities that you were seeking. But it was an important threshold for me because I was going to business school while also working full time. So I was a part-time student in the Stern's Land Gown program. And it was challenging because it was during the first few years of the WNBA. I was traveling quite often. Most often, about 4 days a week, I would be on the road. And the other 3 days, I would be in the classroom after working a full day in the office. And so this week, leading up to graduation, I had my parents in town. I had one of my older brothers in town to celebrate with me. And it was their first trip to New York, my parents' first trip to New York. So I was going to show them New York City. So we went to the Lion King on Broadway. We went to the Apollo Theater for another show. I was showing them Central Park. I was showing them all of the best things about New York City that I had access to and that I'd worked hard to be able to share with them. And we were coming back from Lion King, dressed to the nines. My parents in their church outfits, and my brother and I dressed really well. And we were coming back to my apartment. I lived on the Upper West Side, so 71st and Broadway, a beautiful apartment about 2 blocks from Central Park. I had lived there at that stage about 4 years, a little over 4 years, and was familiar with a lot of the people in the building. And as I was walking up to the building, there was another woman who was entering the building, and we didn't have a doorman. So she had unlocked the outer door to the building, and we were following right behind her. And so as she opened the door, I went to check my mail, and then the door was still open. So I just went to grab the door and walk in with my parents. And she quickly ran back to the door and slammed it in our face and said, I don't know who you are. You don't live here. And my mother in that moment was like, my daughter's lived here for 4 years. But it was, she felt threatened by me, thought that I was trying to sneak into the apartment, and all sorts of things were going through my mind. I'm like, look, we literally are dressed significantly better than she was in that moment, dressed really nicely, subtly walking through the door, right? We weren't causing any havoc. And actually it had never happened before. I had met so many different neighbors that I had held the door for and vice versa. And in this moment, I was embarrassed. I was frustrated for my parents to have to see that experience. You know, my mother was someone who was nervous about me living in New York, but after 4 years, had heard all the great stories and had a great time leading up to that. That felt like I was safe and New York was a safe city. And in that instance, that all was taken away. And I remember having a subtle conversation with my parents. We didn't go into depth about it, but we talked about what that experience was like. Did I know that woman? Why would she do that? What did I have to prove? But what I also recognized was that in that moment, again, on the precipice of getting my MBA, it also shifted me a little bit as well. And it made me dig deeper into who I'd always been, of having to prove myself, having to prove that I was worthy, not making that woman wrong for how she acted in that moment, but making me have to stand up and show up even more fully and be more present in the workplace to prove that I was worthy of being there. And I think that subtle things like that, you may all have a very different story, a different journey. It may be something similar to the story I mentioned about my client where there was a microaggression that took place in the workplace. It could be something blatantly obvious like someone trying to slam the door in your face when they feel threatened by you. But I think that how we react and respond to those things in the moment and what we take away and where we point the finger, if you will, I think is a really important context. I don't have any answers. I think we'll dig into this a little bit today with our special guest as well. But I want to make sure that we actually talk about these moments. We don't get embarrassed. We don't point the finger at us and say that we aren't worthy, but we actually start to unpack society writ large and understand that these things happen all the time. And no matter what your educational attainment, no matter how much money you have in the bank, how well dressed you are, sometimes we're reduced to the color of our skin or an identity that we reside in. And that could be really frustrating, but we need to tell these stories and we need to share these stories so that we can unlock that for other individuals who think that it is just about them, who think that, right, these experiences only happen to them and they get frustrated and they start to put their head down and feel like they have to prove themselves versus understanding the system and the structures and knowing how to respond and react in that moment so that the next time someone who lived in that building walked in the door and this woman encountered them, maybe she would think and pause and respond differently in that moment. And so that's one of those inside stories of outside moments that lingers in my mind to this day. I got to tell you, I don't have any answers for you of how I should have responded if I didn't respond correctly or properly in that moment. But the one answer I have is that I wish I would have spent more time in conversation with my family and my friends about that moment and unpacking it a little bit to reconcile it and understand it so that it didn't debilitate me or impact negatively, perhaps, my journey moving forward. And that is what Unlocking the Club is about. We want to unpack those inside stories of outside moments where we feel like we don't fit in, and to allow us to literally lean into our power, reclaim our power, share our story, and unlock the truth, so that we can help others that look like us, have similar lived experiences, and can benefit from our candor and honesty. So that's a little bit about my journey and my story, and how I am continuing to try to unlock the club based on experiences that I've had. And I'm looking forward to today's conversation with our special guest, Mario Shane, where we continue to try to unlock the club and get a really unique perspective from the financial sector, someone who has had a long experience and journey in the financial sector. And so I'm looking forward to unlocking the club with today's guest, Mario Shane. Today on Unlocking the Club, I will be joined by Mario Shane. Mario is Managing Director in Oaktree's Sourcing and Origination, the S&O group, focusing on private credit sourcing and deal origination in North America. He has over 25 years of experience in investment banking, private equity, investments, and capital markets. Before joining Oaktree, Mario was an investment consultant with the firm for 2 years. And prior to that, he was a managing director with both Detweiler, Fitton & Co. and Monarch-based Securities, a vice president at Hoke, Breedlove, Wesneski & Co., and a senior vice president and director of research sales with Capital Institutional Services. Thanks for tuning in as we unlock the club with Mario Shane.
Angela, thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to spend this time with you and unlocking the club and having these conversations that I think can be very helpful and transformative for many of us, going through these different careers and approaches to life and next steps for us, as well as it can also help, those who we collaborate with and those of our colleagues around us. So I think everyone can benefit from this. So it's a real pleasure, real honor. Thank you for hosting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a joy having. I'm so happy that you said yes to being part of this conversation. And I agree with you. So often we tell these stories through the lens of Black women, and our target audience is Black women for a reason, because I don't think that there's enough stories and information out there that in support of Black women. But I think that the information that we share on this show resonates with so many different people, and we get so much feedback, Mario, from men and women in different identities and races and ethnicities from around the globe that these stories resonate with. And so I am again thrilled to have you on the show as our second man to be a guest on Unlocking the Club, because I think that your journey is one that offers so much to our audience, and you are somebody, such a positive spirit, that has really for a long time dedicated yourself to this career in the financial sector. I think that you can offer a lot to our guests. And so we just heard a little bit about your journey and all of the great things that you've done around private equity and investment banking. Mario, I would love to hear who you actually had to be as a Black man as you were navigating the financial sector.
Yeah, I think it's been a little tricky over my career, and excited to be in the seat that I'm in now. But I think one of the things that I've had to navigate is you want to be professional, on top of your game, show you have the capabilities and knowledge and confidence to do it. But as an African American male, you can't be too loud, you can't be too aggressive, you can't lean in too much, you can't maybe say something too firmly, right? So I think those are some of the things that I've always had to be a little conscious about. I think it's getting a lot smoother, easier today in 2022 than in the earlier parts of my career. And I think people are a lot more accepting of just who you are and your comfort and just how you approach things. But I think those are some of the things that earlier on in my career, I think I had to be very conscious of, right? And my size, look, I mean, as a former, college football player and a lineman, I was almost 300 pounds, now I look like a safety or something now. So it's less of a factor now, but as a much bigger person, before, I think I had to be even more conscious about that. But, those things are part of you, and those things are all a part of who I am. And those things, all good, bad, have shaped, who I am to this point. And really, I'm just in a great position for the next chapter and the next ride in my life.
Well, Mario, you talked a lot about what you couldn't do, right, along the way, and that you were aware of those things, particularly from a physical standpoint, right, as you're walking in a room. And I've heard so often from, Black men that have a physical presence, that sometimes they have to make themselves small when they enter rooms,
Right.
so as not to intimidate others. What made you conscious of those things?
Yeah, look, I think it changed, right? Because when you're young and upcoming and as an athlete and you're bright and a person of size, it's you're heralded, you're a leader, and you're very well respected. And it's a non-factor for me growing up. It was a positive for me, in my youth and teens and early 20s and all of that. And then it was really kind of a transitioning from, post Stanford to, okay, now you're out here in this workforce. People see you a little differently. You don't have those accolades and that branding necessarily behind you that you did, as an athlete at Stanford. And now you're seen and viewed as a professional, which is great and fine, but people are making a lot of other different assumptions about you without you even knowing it. And so, it took me a little bit in terms of just trying to figure that out, or you're getting on an elevator and, people scoot to the side and clutch their purse or something as you're getting on an elevator and you're dressed up in a suit and you're like, well, what is that all about? You know what I mean? So you go through a few things like that, and then you're like, okay, so, I speak, I get on an elevator, I understand, I'm a person of size. I just say, good afternoon, or how are you, or something, just to put people at ease, right? So over my career, I've tried to be a little more proactive, with some of those things. And then I think when people see, oh, okay, look, you're professional, you're well-spoken, you're on the way to a meeting just like I am too, everybody kind of relaxes. But you have to take that upon yourself to be the proactive one. Don't just sit back and think if you don't say anything, it's going to be smooth. Sometimes it's not. So I've learned to just speak up early in those situations,
Yeah. Was there a stage in your journey where it became evident that you had to do that? Because how I've known you, Mario, like you were this offensive lineman, you had this presence, but you had this genuine, approachable spirit to you as well that was contagious, and people wanted to be in your company. Was that to compensate for the fact that people may be intimidated by you, or was that just your natural persona?
Yeah, I think part of it was my natural persona, but then as I got, older and post Stanford, I was like, this is part of my natural persona, but then it worked for me. It's a part of I think it worked for me. And then I think I can't say it was necessarily required, but it was beneficial, right? And then instead of me trying to just hate on that situation or be negative about, hey, you got to be a little more proactive. If you don't speak up, some people may feel uncomfortable around you, right? So instead of that being a negative for me, I turned it into a positive for me. And I was like, okay, I'll just do that. And then as a result of me doing that, I think it's allowed me to build bridges quicker, build relationships faster. People feel very, comfortable around me or trusting with me and bridging those gaps a little quicker sooner. So I think, part of it was natural. Part of it was, hey, I just need to do this. And then after you do it, you get a better skill at it and you get smoother and comfortable at it. And then as a result of those things, I think now over my career, it's just helped transform, a part of who I am. But it's very helpful, for me, obviously, in business and sourcing and originations at a firm like Oaktree and doing, private equity and investment banking. I think a lot of people who see someone, like me coming, many times they think the private equity world, we're just going to, chew you up and spit you out and, eat your firstborn. Right. So I think when they meet with me and then get comfortable with me and understand, hey, listen, we're just here to try to help solve the issues that you have. We have a lot of flexibilities. And then I educate them on, how we work and what it is that we do. They feel a lot comfortable quickly. And then I think after people feel comfortable quickly, then you can really get to the business aspects of it. Right. But if people can't get comfortable, you're going to have a harder time, getting to the business aspects of it. Right. So I think those things have really helped me over my career.
Well, Mario, the earliest that I knew you, and we go back to undergrad, It felt like, so you were playing football, but you quickly got into working in the financial industry. And I'm just wondering, like, private equity wasn't something that was in my vocabulary in Mountain Home, Idaho, right? And I just wonder, what was it that planted the seed in your mind to pursue a career in this industry? Because we talk so often about the lack of access to capital for people of color. We talk a lot about the wealth building that has not necessarily happened in our communities. What was it that helped you bridge that gap?
Yeah, so I understood there was a gap and there was a space and a void to fill. So I went down that path with little additional support, mentoring, guidance. I had great people that helped me early on in my career. I started out as an asset management firm as an advisor, and that was a great start for me. And I had support, right, and good people there. And there's people, from those firms that I'm still very close with today that have been tremendously helpful to me. At the same time, I really didn't have somebody who was like, hey, you need to think about private equity, or you need to think more about investment banking, or hey, you have the skill sets and the talent and the know-how, and you've got that intellectual curiosity to do more, right? I didn't have that person, and it definitely wasn't someone, looking like me that could grab me and just say, hey, think about these things, or approach it this way, or put yourself over here, or have you considered these things? I didn't have any of that at the time, right? And so to me, that's a part of what I'm doing today, to fill that void. But then also, as you talk about, kind of the microaggressions, even when I was an advisor early on in my career, look, I put my heart before the business. I try to do the right thing, for a client, and was very concerned about their assets and their portfolio. We had been speaking about a transaction and trying to help them out. I made that transaction on the client's behalf with the markets going down, very much so. It all worked out great for the benefit of the client. And then during the discussions, the client finds out, I'm African-American, because we were supposed to have a meetup soon afterwards. And now all of a sudden there's an issue. And now I got my management involved. And now all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, what's just happened here? And now all of a sudden it's like, hey, you weren't supposed to do that. And I was like, well, I was trying to take care of the client's best interest, and I'm out the door. It's time for you to go. And I'm like, wait a minute, how does this even happen to me? And you think you're trying to do the right thing, and something like that shifts or alters for you. But for me, the strange thing in that is that steered me to the path for more investment banking and private equity and consulting and all the things that I've gotten into in terms of my capital markets activity. So that wasn't the way that you would necessarily like to get there. But if that didn't happen, I'm not where I am today, So I look back on those things, and you think about the stuff that shapes you and molds you into who you are. Even those things that may seem real uncomfortable and uncertain at some point in time really turn out to be the path, to put you into the position that I am currently.
I greatly appreciate, right, that spin on it, because literally was just having this conversation with another colleague. If things didn't go wrong in another situation, she would have still been at that same company, right? And it's the best thing that happened, because it opened up another universe. And it sounds like that's exactly what happened to you. And I want to dig into that scenario, because, I was very aware of that situation, Mario, and it indirectly affected me. Like, right, this wasn't my life that it impacted, right? But it did. And knowing and hearing that story, and knowing how hard you had worked for so long, and were on your way to partner at a young age in this firm, and literally someone walks into a building, walks past you, they're looking for you, but they walk past you because you're a Black man looking for Mario Shane. And when they find out that that was the Mario Shane, and he happens to have a certain hue, that now all heck breaks loose, and this person shouldn't be managing my portfolio. Like, that to me changed the way that I thought about corporate America, right? Like, I didn't know what corporate America was, didn't have anybody in my immediate family that had been on that journey. So this was the first time that it felt tangible, that no matter how successful you are, right, a Stanford degree, making millions of dollars for somebody, that in a moment, because of the color of your skin, it could be taken away. And I want to pause, because I think that you're looking at the bright side of things, which I think we've all been so good about. I think that we have 400 years of looking at the bright side of things. But how did you feel in that moment after how hard you worked, the disloyalty from your client and from your teammates or your boss?
Yeah, look, it was a ground shaking moment for me, right? Because you're like, look, I'm the good person. I've done everything right that I'm supposed to do all the way through, and you carry all of that with you, and you're trying to do the right thing. I put my heart before my business, approach in that point, right? And so I learned a lot, from that also, right? Business is business. It's not personal, and it's business. And so there's only so far that you can try to take things, and you can't expose yourself or risk, some things that you're doing, even though when you're trying to, quote, do the right thing, right? So that was a way of getting some of those hard, life lessons. But then to me, it was, well, look, I'm young. I got a long way to go. So I didn't really look at it as like, this is some kind of a major setback. I looked at it as like, what did you learn from that? Right?
Right.
What did you learn from that quickly? And then I also realized, like, okay, where do you go from here? And fortunately, but you kind of direct, some of your own opportunities, right? And so through directing my own opportunities, I landed with, very high quality investment bank, really helped shape and broaden my career, even in a capital markets background. Even after 2 years at being at that firm, I was the top performer in that firm, even only after 2 years. I'm still young in my career just because I wanted it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And you can't measure a person's desire, drive, intellectual curiosity, that heart factor. I think you can look at people on a piece of paper and acumen and pedigrees and certain tests, but you can't measure that drive. And so to me, it was like, hey, I'm being presented with an opportunity. You're going to show me how to get it done. Well, watch me now.
Yes, exactly.
Watch me. And it's a personal thing, right? I think it's that athlete in me and you. We're not competing against somebody else. We're trying to be the best we can be. And that's a self thing inside of us that motivates us, right? Somebody else doesn't have to tell us to do it. I'm going to do it because I've got the drive and I want to be the best Mario that Mario can be.
Yeah. Well, and I sense that continues to be the case, and that you are not just embodying that, but you're embodying that as a father. Right? You have two bright, beautiful young women in your household who are following in your footsteps and your wife's footsteps. How do you pass that mentality on to the next generation?
Yeah, I'm extremely conscious, about that and my role, as a father. For many years, I served on the board for the National Center for Fathering, which is a great, national organization for many years. And a lot of that was just talking about, one, being present, two, being, resonant, being available, listening, and then three, leading by example, right? Call it loving, coaching, modeling, right? And I take a lot of pride in those three things, right? Loving, coaching, modeling, right? And then so when you think about that, that's got a lot. That's those three words mean a lot when you start thinking about how to, help parent, and then also how to help parent, two young ladies, right? Is different. And so to me, it's being available to have conversations and trying to be present when you're having those conversations. And look, we're busy. There's a lot going on in my house, family of four and two, active athletes and strong in academics and sports. And so everybody's not fully available all the time. And you just got to understand that and be with that too. But then you also have to consciously carve out some moments where you're just paying attention. Unfortunately for me, with their sports activities, it's revolved around that. We're traveling, or we're spending time together, or we're doing something around that where it might just be the two of us, or it's a extended time at home, where we can just be present and, Wall Street's not going on and there's other distractions that we don't have, and try to really pay attention, at those moments.
Yeah. Well, a couple of years ago, with the tragic passing of Kobe Bryant, right? That kind of slogan, girl dad, became pretty prominent and popular. And it's, taken some hits because people are like, well, no, this isn't, don't just post a hashtag on Twitter or Instagram, right? Like, this is your expectation. Don't just get credit for being in a photo or being at a game or showing to a parent teacher conference. Be in their lives, right? And be vested in their future. As you look at the corporate landscape that you've been navigating as an African-American male, like, what are some of the clubs that you now are privy to that you think need to be unlocked for Black women, such as your young daughters?
Sure. The Kobe thing is a very personal one, to me. and my daughters, as you're talking about that topic, when that happened, I mean, it's just one of the strangest things in life. My oldest daughter just so happened to be playing against Kobe's daughter the day before the accident, which is just unbelievable, right? So, she's playing against Kobe's daughter, Gigi, on a Saturday, and they're coming on a Sunday, and it just that they were on the court expecting to play them again, and then everyone hears about the news, right?
Yeah.
So what a moment in time. And wildly enough, my daughter's in one of the last pictures with Kobe. Like that Saturday, we have a photo with him and my daughter and some of her teammates, which is just unbelievable, right?
Really?
Yeah, it's just unbelievable. Needless to say, it's on the wall and kind of the Lakers, purple and gold, and what a moment in time. But I tried to use something like that even to listen, to what she was going through, right? And how she felt about it. And, she had a competition, that next day back in Dallas now. And I was like, hey, do you want to do this? Do you need some time? You're like, I get it. Everybody deserves a breather. If you need a minute, then let's just step away. Right. So I made it available that she didn't feel like she had to do it, but she wanted to do it, and she stepped into it, and she played a phenomenal game. And I'll never forget, at that moment, she was trying to bring her team back, and she's hitting multiple threes, and we're battling, and she just came up a little bit short. But she hit a three late in that game, and she just let out this scream on the court. And I'd never seen that from her before. Just this, yeah. And the hair on my neck just was like, as a parent, you're watching that. And I know what she had been going through. She needed that. She needed to play, right? She needed that. That was her way of managing through that and having that release. And at that moment, like, she got it all out. You know what I mean? That was what she needed. So I think it's everybody deals with situations like that a little different, but I think you just got to listen. You got to be available and just try to support them through, the best way that you can. And I think, and then to your other question, Angela, which is about what about the clubs, that we're trying to unlock, in this current seat that I'm in this profession at this stage in my career. And I would say, look, we're very conscious. And fortunately, I'm at a firm that's, very forward looking and gets it and is very active, in this space. And so, I'm part of a couple organizations. The first one is the Underrepresented Groups Committee, inside Oaktree, which is people of all different areas that maybe have had less representation in the past. And so the firm's very conscious about that. And then look, it's good business. It's good business. You're doing good, and it's good business. I think now corporate America has realized you want people from different backgrounds. You want people from different facets of life, because when you're sitting there trying to make a decision on, billions of dollars, you want to hear those perspectives, right? And all of that information that you get, those data points or those nuggets, are very valuable when you're trying to make those critical decisions. And so our firm welcomes, that diversity and welcomes that convergence of ideas and information, which is great. And it's good business. It's not just doing the right thing. It's good business. I think we make better outcomes, as a direct result of that. So that's one thing I think it's helpful. The other thing, that I'm involved in is, alternative finance, and it's focused on investing in Black futures. Okay. And part of this organization is around gathering, supporting, promoting other people of color, both men and women, who are coming from predominantly HBCUs, and providing those people, a pathway, into private equity and into other fields, around, high levels on Wall Street. And they have support from people like myself, who I didn't have, a Mario to call on, right? I had great people to call on, and I appreciate their help. But this private equity landscape and this aspects of Wall Street is a little tricky to navigate. And to be able to have some people that are good resources that can talk with you about the training you need or the approach you need, or here's some of the paths that might fit for you based on your interest and personality and skill sets, is invaluable. And hopefully that's shortening the cycle that next, crowd behind me is going to take before they're in some of these positions of influence.
What are some of the things? So, right, there's some great programs that are starting to be invested in. And a program is only good as the commitment to actually shifting the system and the structures. Right. So we hear the conversation all the time that there's no one in the pipeline but you just mentioned like there's so many talented young
Mhm.
people, such as yourselves, right? All across the country in different schools on different campuses. What are some of the things, the systems and the structures that have to shift and change to allow them to thrive?
Yeah. Well, I think particularly for young ladies, there's a program called Girls Who Invest, and we support that program. Where you can be thinking about that as a college student. Getting involved in Wall Street and what does that mean. So there's levels and areas of exposure where young professionals can get their arms around it that way, and then also be supported by people like myself and other women on Wall Street, which is very helpful, right? And so I think those are the ways that we try to think about it. I think, the other facets, to this are, look, just trying to be available to people, not just in finance, but in other areas too, who just see you, having success and doing something. They're like, hey, what are you doing? How did you do what you did? Like, what's up with that guy? Right. And just being able to, make yourself not an ivory tower type, where people, can approach you, and those who do, who have an interest, I really try to take a minute to spend some time, with them and share with them and listen to the things that they're trying to get accomplished, and try to help shape where they're trying to go with it. So I think there's a few ways, that I'm trying to approach it going forward.
Yeah. Do you feel a responsibility based on the access that you've received, or like what compels you to invest your time? You have a lot going on. What compels you to continue investing your time in these different programs?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the responsibility. And I think, as I said before, there wasn't someone saying, hey, here's how you navigate private equity for me, right? I didn't have parents, in private equity. I think about the conversations that happen around, our house, and my daughters, and naturally they hear me on the phone, or they're with me when I'm in the car and driving, the things that they just get exposed to. And that's just so much of it. It's just exposure, right? If you have exposure that stimulates that curiosity and learning, then from that, you can take things and shape it from there. And it's nothing seems like off limits, or, oh, I'll never have a chance at that, or, oh, that's just not for me. Well, you'll find out what's for you, but don't close the door to it, and create a no before you even approach it, right? And I think so many times historically, that's been what we've done, or that's been the things maybe some parents instilled in their children. Hey, that's not for you. You need to go do this, or you don't really have a chance of doing that. Go focus on this, and kind of closing off something, before it even has a chance to sprout, right? And so now I think, we're doing things like that and being conscious. And I think corporate America is a lot more conscious now, right? To where there's organizations like the ones I mentioned, but there's all kinds of corporations now that know this is the right thing to do, and it's good business, as a result of it.
Yeah. Well, you've also shared some things that have helped you unlock clubs. We talk a lot about golf, right? So, and back in the day, I know you were trying to get my brother Gary on the golf course. I'm sure he broke a bunch of golf clubs during your guys' trips. But the premise behind the show, Unlocking the Club, was literally like this beautiful tool that is golf that unlocks so many opportunities for people that most likely don't look like us, right? To make deals, to be on the course, negotiating deals with one another. And you've talked a little bit about like how being on the golf course opens up relationship for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what else has opened up relationships?
Look, I think golf is helpful, right? And fortunately, look, my father was a very good golfer, and he grew up caddying on the segregated courses, in Tennessee, and he was a very good golfer, and learned young, played young, and caddied for other African American doctors, lawyers, et cetera. That's what he grew up doing, right? And so as a result of that, he showed me how to play young, because he was like, hey, you need to know how to play this game. And so I'm, late elementary, early junior high, and he's extremely good. He was a scratch golfer. And so I'm out with him just learning the basics. So I could play early, but because of my desire and interest in football and, other sports, growing up, my focus was on other things. But I'll never forget his importance of saying you need to know how to play. And so, look, I can play. And, at one point I was pretty good before, the girls' activities have now steered me to, I don't have as much time for that anymore. But it is helpful because look, you spend 4 hours with someone, you're going to get to know them a little bit. And, during the course of a round, they're going to have some moments of greatness and you're going to see how they be. And they're also going to have some moments of not so good and you're going to see how they be. And they're going to see how you are as well, too. Right. So you want to have fun and enjoy it. Don't take yourself too serious, when you're out there playing, and just be a good golf partner, I think is the most important thing with all of that. But it is a fun game. I really enjoy the game. I'm looking forward to getting back to that kind of next chapter, after, we're empty nesting. And fortunately, my wife plays and we would play a lot together, before the girls got so active. So that'll be fun to do a lot of those things again. The other clubs, that I think are important is, look, I think in this business, if you're not a social person, it's harder. That doesn't mean you can't be successful, because there's people that do extremely well purely just on the quantitative side or purely just on the analysis side, of this business, and they do great. So you can have a great career if you do that. But at the other side of the coin, I think it's hard to be really great in this business without being a little bit extroverted. It's helpful because when people are moving around billions of dollars, they want to feel comfortable. They want to feel like they're working with somebody who knows that they got it. If you tell them, hey, we're going to get this done, that's all they need to hear. And they need to settle down and relax with that. And you're dealing with some other very influential, people, in the process. So they want someone who they can feel confident and trust with and feel like, hey, if Mario says we're good, then we're good. Right? And that takes some time and comfort and abilities to do that, right? And you got to be careful when you say that we're good too, because you got to mean it, you got to own it, you got to stand up and back that up, right? And situations in our business change, all the time, and you got to be, real transparent, with that also. Hey, here's the situation, here's what's changed, here's why we got an issue, here's what we're going to do to deal with it, or this is just a very difficult issue that we can't get our way through this, So people respect and appreciate, the transparency. But I think you just got to be prompt with good news, be prompt with bad news as well, too.
Yeah. Be prompt, right? Like I'm sure it's easy to get on the phone and make that call when there's some more zeros added to the bank account. And when it doesn't go that way, I'm sure it's a little bit more difficult to do that. But you talk a little bit about, this journey that you've been on. You're grateful for things that have happened early in your career because they prompted some opportunities that you now are privy to. What are some other clubs that you're trying to unlock? As you look at your horizon and your career journey, what else would you want to unlock?
Well, I think, a father of two young women, I naturally want to unlock other opportunities for women of color. It's just a natural seat for me to be in. And so, women of color in private equity, right? If that's what they decide to do, great. If others want to do that, I'll do everything I can do to help everybody who has an interest in it. But that's just of an area that's a particular interest, to me, because, back to what we talked about, it's just access. It's access and it's relationships. And when you have those things, you'll find out, yes, there's some very gifted, talented, extremely bright people out there, but access and relationships go a long way, in our business. Our analysis of the financial model isn't going to be that much different than the analysis of the financial model at some other firm, right? We're going to do it a way that we like to do it, or there's certain metrics in our underwriting that are different, that'll help us get to a different outcome, right? But what about the people involved in that deal, right? What about the character of the ones we're working with? What about what strategically are they really trying to get accomplished, right? What are the options if this goes bad? Like all of that stuff is what really makes a deal or not.
Right. So access, right, and relationships. We hear about that so often in our conversations here on Unlocking the Club, right? This is the social capital so often. As again, those who are in marginalized identities, we have to work harder than anybody else, right? But at a certain point, after you've proven your capability and your competence, it is access and relationships. Who are the gatekeepers to those things in private equity?
Yeah, well, look, I think the gatekeepers, that's an interesting question, because there's people like myself who are in, managing director or kind of a senior position. And those people have influence to who may get hired or who gets an opportunity to come in, or who, where that capital goes is helpful also, right? So, in the sourcing and originations role that I sit in, I'm kind of the tip of the spear for the firm, right? So the opportunities that I'm bringing into the firm are going to affect what ultimately the capital that gets deployed, right? So if I'm just saying it's a no right away, sometimes it doesn't even come into the firm, right? And so, I don't take that lightly, but I also know if there's things that I'm bringing into the firm, I am conscious about that because those things can help, shape other opportunities for people as well too. So that is a natural filter, that I'm putting stuff through. Not just is it a yes or no, but if it's a yes, what else could this, company relationships do to help other people at the firm? Not just the benefit, of our LPs, which that's the most important factor. We got to get the return for our limited partners because, they've entrusted that fiduciary responsibility to us. But also as a part of that, how else can that help shape, the environmental and the social and the governance factors, that are part of what we do as well. ESG, is a critical component, to what we do. And every deal that we look at, goes through a certain filter for that.
Interesting. We're going to pivot a little bit. You talked about it earlier, where in college you were a big offensive lineman, 300 pounds, I think you said,
Yes.
right? And now like slim trim, like, right? So wellness, like there was a stage that you really started to invest in your health. Like what was the trigger to that? Like what was the catalyst for you shifting that mindset?
Yeah. Unfortunately, my dad passed, younger and just didn't take care of himself. Right. And he could have done a better job, at some of those things. And we can all look back and go, you don't know what you don't know, And I think there's other pieces of information and stuff that could have been more helpful, for him. But those are choices he made. Right. And so, what I've learned is there's choices that, I can make. And, strangely enough, I've gotten into power yoga. Right. So here comes this guy, 200 and something pounds. I'm in class and look, and I can do a headstand now. I can do crow. I can do all these things that I would have never thought I would have been able to do. And, my Stanford football colleagues would have been like, you can do what? Right. But now look, I've they call it a practice, right? It really is that. I ate my humble pie. I didn't try to do, this stuff in the very beginning. I just did what I could do. But I've been at it, for some years now. I try to go a couple, 2-3 times a week. It's not just like my only thing, but I try to do it, with some levels of consistency. And it is really helpful. And it has helped me in terms of, my wellness and my flexibility and, all of those things. I give a lot of credit, to that.
Yeah. Well, and you grew up in this era, and you talked about your father, where we were taught to never let them see us sweat. And I wonder, right, like I'm listening to you, we've been talking for, 45 minutes or so, like, right, so composed, so much going on, such a positive perspective on everything. And I also wonder, what does it take to be you, to show up that way consistently?
Yeah, look, it takes a certain level of energy, but fortunately for me, who I am as a representative on Wall Street and who I am, they're not that far apart, right? Fortunately for me. So I don't have to transform into somebody else to do my job, right? The level's pretty much the same. I tell people, this is who I am. But that the events of my life and the sports that I can't, underemphasize how important that is, have shaped me, and going through all of those things, that you go through in life have, prepared me for a time such as this and this point, right? All of those things have shaped me. And so, to me, it's pretty much very similar person, which, keeps, I think, a lot of the pressures or stressors off of me, right? Because I think it's really stressful and a lot of pressure if you are one complete different person during the day and you're one completely different person when you go home that evening, right? I have learned how to turn it on and turn it off, right? I call it kind of flipping the switch, right? Like in sports, when I would buckle up that chin strap, I got to turn it on. I'm a different person right now, right? But then when I step out, I'm not in between the lines anymore. I'm back doing something different. You're able to shift, between those two worlds, right? And so I am very conscious, about that, kind of at the end of the day, I try to take a little time to, unwind or do some things to decompress, so to speak, before I try to transition, into dad of two girls and husband and all of that.
Right. When you talk about that worlds are colliding a little bit, right? There's a much narrower gap between the two now than before. And we talk quite a bit, code switching, right, is prevalent for many, Black men, women, Latino men and women, like, right, of having to be something in the workplace and something else, like, right, at home. And it's exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been able to bridge the gap between the two. Like, how are you able to reconcile the two and show up that way? And how would you advise others, particularly earlier on in their career, to be able to do so?
Right. I think there's a lot more support now in 2022 than it was, earlier on in my career. I think if I was a young person, I would say, look, seek these things out. Your organization probably has other internal organizations or support groups or things that are happening. Participate, right? Go check it out, I would say. And then if it doesn't, grab some people a little bit ahead of you and some a little bit behind you, and then just have those conversations. Fortunately, our firm is very focused on providing people of support. Ahead of me, I have people that I can call, extremely senior at the firm who are support for me, as well as I, support, others at the firm kind of behind me. So we're very conscious, about that in our organization. And I think it's becoming more commonplace in a lot of areas in corporate America now. So I would tell someone, look, seek it out. And I bet you will probably find it. And if it's not in your organization, some organizations will let other people participate, even though they may or may not, belong to, quote, that company, but they could participate in some, maybe external activities.
Mm-hmm. Well, is there someone on your journey, Mario, that has had the significant impact on who you are?
Oh, well, I think about my father, of course, right? Fortunately, my dad, was there. He was my basketball coach when I was in the early elementary, and basketball was my first love, even before, football. And so fortunately, that time shaped me a lot, right? Just being there, being present. Look, he was tougher on me than he was on the other players. And he pulled me aside and he was like, look, I'm going to be tougher on you intentionally because you're the coach's kid and it's going to be tougher on you. And I got to show everybody that I'm not favoring you. And, so it was we had these conversations, and look, when you're, 8 years old, you're like, man, why are you being so hard on me? But I look back at all of that and I go, man, how fortunate I was to have someone who could see what life was going to be like for me and was giving me those, little nuggets early. And so I try to do that, for my girls, a lot of love, support, compassion, listening. But I also firmly tell them, hey, look, here's what you got to deal with now. And so hopefully they'll be very prepared, going forward.
Well, I have no doubt that your father would be extremely proud of who you are and how you're raising your two young girls to be great students, great citizens, and competitive athletes. Both in very different domains, right? Basketball, one's following in your footsteps, and soccer as well. But Mario, thank you so much. Again, I could go on and continue to dive into your career journey because I think it's been fascinating, and I appreciate how you are looking back and pulling people through your efforts at Oaktree Capital. And I'm thankful for that. And I look forward to the next Mario Shane that will get an opportunity, right? Because you're going to be fighting for them to have access and being there to be in relationship with them along the way. But we're not done yet. We will continue here on Unlocking the Club with Mario Shane here on the Back Nine in a moment. We'll be right back. All right, Angela Taylor, your host for Unlocking the Club. We're back on Unlocking the Club with our guest, Mario Shane. And Mario, we're here on the Back Nine. So we talked a little bit about golf a little earlier. And the Back Nine was always a place that I was looking forward to so I can end all of the tragic swings that I had on the golf course and how many balls I'd lost along the way. But here on the Back Nine, we want to finish strongly with some questions just to get to know you a little bit better. So the first question for you is, aside from being at home, where do you feel most comfortable?
Wow. Look, I mean, fortunately, I feel comfortable in business settings, right? It is comfortable for me. As I talked before, I'm not two different people, in those environments and at home. So I feel very comfortable. I love it. I love being out there. I love the pulse of it. I love the always learning aspects of this. There's always something new. I have that intellectual curiosity always. I'm working on different types of deals. I'm a generalist, so I'm all over in terms of industries, and I'm also all over the firm in terms of styles or types of how we deploy the capital, which is exciting and fun for me. Some people that may just drive them completely crazy, right? I understand that. To me, I find it fun and exciting. So that's one place, that I think I'm very comfortable. And then I think the other place where I'm very comfortable is in some kind of a gym, fitness class. That's just been always another haven, for me, as a place to just go and relax and unwind.
Well, you're down in Dallas, and right outside of Dallas, where our beloved Cowboys are hopefully this year going to overperform expectations. But I'm just curious, if you were to have a party for 5 and invite 5 guests, living or deceased, to be at the table and in conversation with you, who would those 5 guests be?
Wow, 5. Well, look, I mean, MLK would be one. Then I think Spike Lee would be an interesting one, right?
Nice.
Yeah. Just what he's done in terms of how he shaped film and movies and the whole entertainment, industry would be interesting. Bill Gates would be another one. I would want to hear, his perspectives on his thought leadership around why he's done the things he did and how he, saw. And I think most people have probably read, books about his successes. Zuckerberg, I think would probably be an interesting one to sit, at that table, as well. And then that's 4. And then 5, I think 5 might be Serena Williams, right? I think she has just transformed, something bigger than sports, right? Bigger than, you think about like the top, athletes of a generation. I would put Tiger in there also. Now maybe I'm at 6, but I think people like Serena and people like Tiger have just, gone beyond sports, right? And so I think the combination of sports people, business people who've done, some things exceptional, and then just some, historic, civic leaders. That would be a real fun dinner.
Yes, I say this quite often when I ask this question. I, again, would love to be a fly on the wall, or at least the waiter or waitress, like serving drinks for that, so I can eavesdrop in on that conversation. That would certainly be quite a dynamic conversation to listen in on. Mari, I think that's, you've talked a lot about like how you fit in and you've navigated this workspace. What is a club that you would claim as your own, as you're navigating being a girl dad, right? Being in investment banking and private equity, and all other things that you are enjoying in your life? What's a club that you would claim as your own?
Yeah, I think one of the ones that I have kind of fallen into, right? It wasn't by design, but now there are more men doing power yoga than before. Before it was that's a different club that I didn't think I would have fallen into, and just kind of I'm in it now. But it is great, and class now is it's a third men, 40% men, right? When I first started, it was me.
Wow,
It's
really?
it's like, who's the big guy in the back? What is he doing in here, right?
You're in the wrong class? Did you move?
Yeah. Why is he here, right? What is he doing here, right? But everybody was so embracing of me, and they were like, okay, let's really encourage it, which was really different, right? I showed up and like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm gonna try this out. And everybody was just so like, come on, Mario, you can do it. So I had all these people cheering for me, right, kind of thing, which was really a different shift, right? You're in an environment where you're not expecting to have a bunch of people cheering for you. I instantly had this, incredible amount of people that were very supportive and were seeing me progress and be like, hey, you're getting a lot better. Hey, you're doing right. So it really became this kind of atmosphere that I wasn't really expecting at all.
That's great. I love that. right? And welcoming you into that club. And
That's right.
now that club has become your own. I think
That's right.
so often, like, right, we try to fight and claw our way into a club where, right, they don't see us, they don't want us in that club. But we can be those folks that are welcoming new people into the club, making them feel comfortable, and now they can own that club as well. So I love that. And I love that leading into our last question, Mario, where can people find you, and what are some projects that you're working on or that you're spending a quality time with that you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah. So, look, people who want to continue the conversation, with me about this, because I'm committed to it, they could send something to me at mshane@oaktreecapital.com. They could send something to that email address, and I would pay attention to that. And the other things, that I talked about, is alternative finance and Girls Who Invest. Those are the other two things, that I'm really focused on at the time.
Awesome. Well, we may have to set up a Unlocking the Club Women Who Invest Club with Mario Shane as a special guest as we try to unlock wealth and wealth building. But Mario, again, I thank you so much for your time. I thank you for the perspective and insight that you shared with our listeners today. And I appreciate, what you're doing, unlocking that world that I think is so important for women of color, people of color, Black women to have access into. So thank you for being you. Thank you for joining us here on Unlocking the Club, and for the voice that you're offering into that industry.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Angela. I appreciate it.
Awesome. All right, folks. I'm your host, Angela Taylor, and that was another episode of Unlocking the Club with our special guest, Mario Shane. Learned so much and appreciate Mario's candor about his journey from early on in a career as a financial advisor to the amazing work that he's doing in private equity these days. If you enjoyed this conversation, please continue to listen to Unlocking the Club. Find us on Apple Podcasts or the streaming platform of your choice. If you'd like to continue this conversation, head on over to Facebook and search for Unlocking the Club, the Codebreakers Lounge, and we'll continue this conversation, dig further into what we heard and what we've learned from the conversations that we're having with all of our extraordinary guests. For more information about Mario Shane and the work that he's doing in providing access and relationships to marginalized and historically excluded individuals in private equity, make sure you check out our show notes where you can reach out to Mario and find out more. And for now, this is Angela Taylor, your host for Unlocking the Club. Until our next conversation, be well.
Thanks for listening to Unlocking the Club. If this conversation resonated with you, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or your favorite streaming platform so that you can experience every episode. And follow us on social media, where you'll hear about future guests, access special features, and connect with this amazing community. Head on over there and let us know how you are unlocking the club. Until next time, peace.